This is a little bit, wow, that really looks crappy. I'm sorry about that. I'm hoping everything else will turn out. It's not yellow, it's white. Anyway, this is just to show you a little different way that linguistics can be applied to different situations. Sociolinguistics, particularly, as you've seen with Kate's presentation, with Mark's presentation, and now with mine, there's a wide variety of ways, and also with Dr. Fetzer's, there's a wide variety of ways that we can use linguistics, okay? So I like to look at sort of the interface of language and social institutions. One of my favorite sites is looking at school. There we go. Hello. Much better, much better. Is the site of the school. And I wanted to present you with a little bit of information about, say, the demographics of public school enrollment here in the state of New Mexico. You can see that things in blue, that's the state of New Mexico. This is, and these are institutionalized, this is the census, how the census categorizes people. So American Indian and Alaskan Native students, slightly over 10%. It says black students, close to 2%. Hispanic students, 61.3%. White, 23.6%. And you can see the orange bars are that same distribution across the US. You can see that in the state of New Mexico, we're very different. We're one of the most diverse states in the country. I think California's the first, and we're next. Okay, so what happens in our local public schools? Our local public schools use standardized tests in an increasing fashion to determine how well students are learning, and in particular, they focus on two areas. This happens to be reading. So you can see this is data from the state of New Mexico. Blue is all students. Red is Latino students. Hispanic, again, classified by the government. Okay? So what you can see is it's not great, right? These are PARCC exams. This is the Partnership for the Alliance of what? It's career and readiness, career and academic readiness, academic and career readiness, or something like that. It's in there later. Anyway, so here's kindergarten through second, and then you see this huge drop off, right? But think about it. Kindergarten through second, that's when kids are learning to read, right? Third grade on, they're reading to learn. Okay? So here it's just learning how to decode and figure out the meaning of words. Here it's trying to, use reading for greater things. Okay? And here's math. Also not great, right? If you look at it from the standpoint of the test, this line is 30%. So this is people that are scoring proficient or above in math. My grade, not great. And you're thinking, gosh, what a terrible state of affairs for the schools in the state of New Mexico, okay? What if I told you that the PARCC exams were designed so that no more than 30% would achieve a score of proficient or above? So, basically, PARCC exams, the way that they were set up were those thresholds were set so high that they were designed for that result entirely, okay? So, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about exams. We're going to look into some of the items and see why this is, okay? So let me give you a little background. Very briefly, I'm not going to go into in depth into this history. If you are interested in this, I can give you more information about it. Everything goes back to Darwin, right? So he discovered that there are lots of variations within and across a species. His cousin, Sir Francis Galton, said, I wonder if we can apply that to human beings, not just the animal kingdom, right? And so he's the one, that's why we get fingerprints if you're ever in trouble or people register fingerprints for your passports, for everything else, that's down to him. That spawned a lot of thoughts about intelligence, and Alfred Binet, French psychologist, designed the first intelligence test in 1904, and that set sort of the ball rolling for a lot of other things, because people thought that intelligence was a constant and it could be quantified and measured in people. And Binet designed an objective multiple choice measure so that we can measure things like that, and that has been something that is carried on all throughout history. So you can see how all of these tests started popping up in the early part of the last century, mid part of the century. People thought, well, we need to have a standardized measure across all of the US to see how school children are doing. Up to this point, things were more or less diagnostic. 1983, Nation at Risk comes out, everybody's hair's on fire because, oh my God, kids are not learning what they should be learning, and our economic stature in the world is at risk. Proven later to be false. However, bad ideas have a way of perpetuating themselves. So we've just continued to double down on testing, having testing our main form of accountability to the point where they're almost synonymous. Tests and accountability are almost synonymous with each other, okay? So, here's some of the false, spoiler alert, false ideologies underlying high-stakes tests. That one, all learners start out as equals, they have the same opportunities to succeed, and that things are objective, okay? Intelligence, talent, and skills are universal qualities that all people possess in different amounts, okay? And it's sort of like divided up genetically, right? External factors such as poverty, culture, language, or a history of discrimination have no bearing on an individual's performance, understanding of concepts, or intellectual outcome. Again, these are false ideologies, right? That individuals simply need to be trained in the right way and tested in a uniform fashion, standardization, right? To permit their intellectual gifts to develop to their greatest potential. Therefore, standardization equals objective equals fair. English and math index abilities in all other areas, etc., etc. However, Solano Flores comes in and says, hey, let's remember, all testing is a cultural artifact. Somebody's making decisions about what is legitimate knowledge, how that legitimate knowledge should be displayed, and how to actually test it, okay? So, what am I looking at here? Is the PARCC exam an appropriate assessment to measure the reading and math abilities of Latino, or Latinx, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders? I kind of went across, I would have used just Latinx, but I didn't know how aware 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are going to be of that, of their own identities at that stage. So, in the state of New Mexico. So, there are different ways that we can look at linguistic complexity in general. They can also be applied to text, okay? Phonological, you might not think of that in terms of text, but how are you going to read that? Okay, so how you are transforming things in your mind, also think of in terms of, we may have people who are not first language learners, who are language learners of English, right? Coming from different populations across our state. So, you can look at morphological complexity, syntactic complexity, semantic and lexical, and pragmatic. I'll just kind of skip over that to let you know. Reading is notoriously difficult. We have different genres of reading. We have different tasks that we ask people to do when they're reading something, so it's incredibly difficult to look at reading. Also, there are different cognitive processes involved. If you're at that lower end of the scale and you're decoding words, that takes a lot of time if you're not proficient at that. If you are proficient at that, that becomes automatic. You can devote more of your brain power to actually gaining inferences. People think about math, oh, 1 + 1 = 2 all around the world. But when you look at this, you're saying in your head, 2 + 2 = 4. You're transforming that into words, okay? This, Anybody? Math geeks? Raise your hand. X to the third power, x raised to the 1/3, cube root of x. You can have multiple ways of expressing the same symbols, okay? Math has its own register, has its own lexical items. Polysemy, meaning words have different meanings. So within the domain of math, this means something. Outside of the domain of math, it means something entirely different, okay? Prepositions, normally in everyday conversations, not a big deal. In math, they're important. So they get raised, they carry more semantic weight. So math isn't just an easy sort of a thing, okay? There's a different cognitive load also associated with math questions because you're not only reading left to right, you're reading up and down, okay? So lots more things going on. You have to read things multiple times. So you've got fewer of your memory resources that you can use to actually calculate and solve the problems, okay? So, what did I do? I looked at, oh, and I should say, our governor, when I started out, I had proposed doing this research like November of last year, and our governor very helpfully eliminated the use of the park exams, like first day in office. So I was like, yay, but I'm glad she did it, but also she just invalidated my research. But actually not true, because in looking at that long history of accountability measures, Obama's race to the top, they actually said 2 companies, Park and Smarter Balanced Assessments, those are the only 2 companies that can design the tests for this. So there are still states, even if it's not the state of New Mexico, still states that are using this, the Park exam, although that number is shrinking continually. Okay, so what did I do? I took the English language arts released items for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and I plugged it into a very helpful web-based evaluator, which is online. It looks at all of these different attributes. It uses natural language processing to kind of tag things, and then it does the analysis, gives you a result. I also looked at Shiroki-Hawley's responsive dots. He looks at the cultural relevance. So is something culturally neutral, culturally generic, or culturally relevant? Okay, because if you have kids reading things that have no connection to who they are, they're not going to be thinking about it. They're not. It's going to bounce off their brains. They're not going to be engaged. Okay, so I did that for the reading items. For the math items, I only took the ones that were the word problems. I used LexTutor, which is a word frequency evaluator. So it looks at how frequently the different words appear in the general lexicon. I also looked at Shaftel et al.'s work. They have a linguistic complexity checklist for math items. They did a study on math items. And so I took out the ones that were shown for 4th graders, they looked at 4th, 7th, and 10th. I took the ones that for 4th graders were shown to have a negative impact at a certain threshold. Okay? So in the word problems, in the LexTutor, it will crank out a result. What you look for is a 95% threshold. So wherever you hit in these word bands of the 1,000 most frequent, the 2,000 most frequent, 3,000 most frequent, etc., that's representative of what kinds of things, what kinds of words are found in these kinds of things. So if you're up to this 3,000 most frequent words, you're hitting that 95% right here, then that's what you should be able to read. You should be able to read a 6th grade reader, right? Okay. So let's show you the text evaluator results of some of, this is the ETS one, for the reading items. I didn't give you a description of all of the different stories and things, but what you can see is it cranks out all of these different results of how complex the text is. These are on a scale just so that you know you don't have to really dive deep into this. I put the most important number at the top. What you can see is that these things are scaled here on a 1 to 100. If it's got a plus here, it means that higher numbers indicate more of that quality. And on the ones that have the minus sign, lower numbers indicate more of that quality rather. So what you can see is I've given you readings from grade 3, grade 4, there were 2 of them, from 2017, 2018, grade 4. Grade 5, it was same reading split into 2 parts.